Yeah, so Khen Rinpoche is from Kham. It's an area of eastern Tibet. And when he was 20 years old, he came out of Tibet as a refugee and walked over the Himalayas into Nepal. And then after he got to Nepal, he decided to become a monk. And so he lived up until the age of 20 back with his family in Tibet, where he studied medicine and helped his father with his medical practice with the Tibetan herbal medicine, traditional medicine system. And so then came to India and ordained as a monk and started studying in a Tibetan Buddhist seminary, university for studying Buddhist philosophy, which is in the monastery is called Namdroling Monastery, and it's in South India in a big Tibetan refugee settlement in the state of Karnataka. And so Khen Rinpoche studied there for many, many years and eventually became a teacher and then taught for some years and attained the title of Khenpo. So Khenpo is like a PhD. So you graduate after 9 or 10 years of study in the philosophy university, and then you teach for some time, and then you become like a full-on kind of professor of Buddhist philosophy. So Khen Rinpoche attained that title and has been teaching for many, many years. So he taught for years and in different monasteries in India and Tibet, and has spent also a significant amount of time in personal meditation retreat, and has also been the leader of many, many meditation retreats, and has been teaching in the States for about 10 years. So around 10 years ago, he came and moved to Montana. And so every year he's in the States for, between 8 and 9 months. And then he goes back to Asia, usually in the winter for, November through March or something like that, 3 or 4 months every winter, and goes back to Nepal to teach at some monasteries and nunneries there in India, Nepal, and then also goes to other parts of Asia to teach in Taiwan and Singapore and so forth. So Khen Rinpoche has a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom and knowledge, a lot of his own personal meditation experience, and also a lot of experience teaching both in the traditional system of teaching in the monasteries and nunneries and so forth, as well as experience teaching with Westerners. And he has a lot of experience working with us and working with the particular needs and concerns of, Western students. So, that's that. So hopefully we can get this microphone or Khen Rinpoche's computer functioning better.
아니 나도 고야라 제기진 캠보 타타 생애다지 고도라 캠보 타타 제기진 캠보 means title.
Title.
So we need to sign off of that.
Okay, then.
Bye will be on in 2 minutes.
2 minutes, 1 minute, and 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah.
Less.
Since we have
1 minute, and it take the capital Cambo Tata singing that the Kogo Nala. No, current was taken up. Tata say Tata singing that it does. And Cambo Capo said.
Okay. Since we have a minute, I'm going to introduce Justin. Justin, our translator tonight, has been a student of Buddhism for almost 20 years. He lived in India for about 10 years. He studied at a monastic university. He learned Tibetan while he was living in India, and has been working with Khen Rinpoche for the last few years. He also works as a translator for the Namchak Foundation. Part of what the Namchak Foundation does, other than all the things that I talked about earlier, is translation of ancient texts. So this is Justin's favorite part when I talk about him.
Yeah, it's great. Shane said he looks like I'm ready to move to Montana with my beard and my puffy vest here.
You are, and Justin currently does not live in Missoula, but he will be hopefully moving to Missoula.
Oh no, I am. Oh, dape abudo.
Oh, Tashi dialect. Cambo Tata.
That is Shere Jagmandu. Do. It's not switching, like to Khen Rinpoche's screen isn't switching on. Is yours switching when he talks?
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
One thing not touch it.
Yeah, it's on Namchak side.
Okay, it's fine.
Yeah, then please show is my piece, okay?
Oh, shargado, digdo.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's all. Da. And it drink that the Kempo Tata ge. The children son of Tama. Yoda Silla.
Kempo thought I was saying Kempo Chata or something. I don't know. I think I said Kempo is the title or something. I don't know what I said, but he heard Kempo Chata. Chata means like colorful or something like that in Tibetan. It's very funny. So he just said, "Tell them that the colorful Kempo is talking right now."
Yeah, I think also the Kempo Tulu Mapo Kunga Yores, young the Kempo Kapo singer Yores, that Tata the Tarjas.
And so, yeah, this is Kempo's making jokes that don't make any sense in English, but they're really funny in Tibetan. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Lasso and that ring the Balaya. Oh, Kasevta. Nagatat, Kachu Segone, Chesegone, that the here and the cola, any Chichenama Pong and Samala. Teni Tashi delay down and train down so the Nanyam and Zombi Chompe Gabu Chongs.
So first of all, I'd like to say welcome and Tashi Dele. Tashi Dele is a Tibetan greeting to everyone who is gathered here tonight, and thank you all for coming and joining us.
Lasso Anda Katson Tava Jik Laman Somo down any Jaska. Any con number get Tata Ji Gonda Devalate Siji Ye Tabna any Laman Somo Pagin Samla de here. And this homes and they see Yabudo. So now so and this homes and Danga so Tata Ji Saluni Ganga J Yo de Hiore. And this homes and Danga so Chinyam de Ruro Cheche Zubo the Tokuyo Marete ta. That Zungye pass token that you get over here the Cope Nara Gabondo. And that number de Gabo Sarete and then I am Dino Zoom by Insula.
So the other day I was talking on the phone with Jessica from the Namchak Foundation and Lama Tsomo from the Namchak Foundation. And so Lama Tsomo was doing some Saturday evening talks like this, and she decided that she's going to spend some time in retreat. So they asked me if I would do this for the next few Saturdays, and I agreed. So, we're all experiencing a lot of difficulties right now, both in our environmental outer kind of situation, as well as, in our inner worlds. We're also, everyone kind of experiencing some difficulties right now. So even though we can't meet in person, it's nice to be able to see each other and, meet online like this. And so it's really pleasant for me, and I hope it is for you too. I think it probably is for you too.
Yeah. Ani that this gala that taringa so gase ta nasa digi chen la ten cheche ani ta chik mugunguni yang ta nasa kungen la nasa ani chik da kashi dig no ni shan dong la so bata mul jo ani dig da nga so chik pha ka dom chen de ni che on de pam jo to la jo ani da lobra la so ba kangu che on de kap de bala ta chik nam ju be nang sang tham che la ya ta ka se de ho ji an de la ten ji ni chik so su ga da sem ba ga to la ya ten de ji ka nga ta be mang bu ji da nga so jong de bare sta lo.
And so this year, we're all experiencing some difficulties here. So the people who have gotten sick have the obvious difficulty of actually having the illness. Many people have also passed away. And, as a result of all the shutdowns, we're experiencing economic difficulties. Schools are shut down, which as a result of that is causing problems in a lot of families and, a lot of difficulties across the board. And so it's, certain that each and every one of us is experiencing some kind of difficulty this year.
So, any dendiji sonzanda, Tange Katon de Sonzanda, Taringa so chick the Bala Samala Kanga Chimbo Chumade, and it tended the J. Kapsalata, Penanga so chick Nangba jigging ya, Ani dela samnos kandis chini tongre. Dela chik kasere tigi nalo ni re ta nangba chik ngui ni samno tangna ta dela chik samno da uchi kar tangre singen da uchi. Ta katsong den da uchi ma hyuna ten song se.
And so thinking about this, you know, I was thinking that what I would talk about tonight was, you know, that since we're all in the midst of this big problem, you know, what would be the Buddhist perspective on this problem? Like what would Buddhists think about, or how would they consider this situation? So that's the topic that I thought I might talk about tonight.
Oh, la so and then this home da na so chik da kanga chembo chi jong sabare da kanga de jong dedikap tbala ya da chi namba chi ngini samno tangba ina kanga de kanga rang ke taina samno ma tangba che yang chi ka se ango da nyang yemba ke thuni samno tangya de ya yore sta yemba ke thuni pe na yang likpi chani chi samno tang che ne de che do na nga so chitang ke chi mi se ke chu se de chi ki ma long na yang de ni kap yang phen thong en do de yore.
And so when this, you know, problem has arisen, and it has already arisen, then what happens, you know, what Buddhism teaches is not to see the problem just as a problem, but to try and see something positive within that, or some kind of goodness, or some kind of good situation that can arise from that. And so even if you are not one who accepts any kind of religion or religious principles, you know, even just thinking of things in this way can be beneficial to anyone.
Oh, so ta pe na chi ta thangbo da wu chi ta na cha de chin laung ku de kap de na laung ba de nyam de ane chi lam song da sha pen se ne chen de pha do ya ke ta chi na ba khorang de no lo la de to chu ge rai pe mong bu yo res thangbo de so de ne to chu da wu de so che che de de yin de na cha song ya ge ko la yang ta de ge zi da nga la so ba de mong bu ji yo re the yeta de so zandang jie ya dang da ji xiao dan jie de so jie ani ba de na sa de lo da ngu se da wo ji da ki ong ba na de du de ni xiao dan da men da nyam de dra jie ni de ba la ko xiao dan ji bu la kha ya ge ma de men ji bu la kha ya ge ma de ni ga de wo ji ni ji gang tu thap de wo ji so jie jie ni ani de de jie ni ba de yang de de wo ji so ge des.
And so even just like specifically within the Buddhist tradition, when an illness is first, you know, arising in a community, then they have various things that they do, you know, kind of ritual practices that they do to try to avert the illness, to try to kind of protect people from the illness. And there are a lot of different types of rituals that Buddhists would enact. And then you know, in order to protect people from the illness, there are a lot of particular kind of blessed, you know, medicinal substances and, you know, mantras and many different methods that they use in order to protect themselves or protect others from the illness. But once the illness has actually, you know, infected someone, as a Buddhist, then they don't just rely on these more like, you know, spiritual or mystical avenues. They combine that with seeking medical treatment. So they don't just only seek medical treatment and forget about the spiritual side. They also don't get into only the mystical and spiritual aspect and ignore the physical medicinal side, but they join those two things together and treat the illness from both sides.
Tadi ndede chige ta pena teni tsek dokjan ra wo chi peche tang de ba ina ti phaju gu mu de la ani njowa kan de wo chi tang thu gu yemi ta ting sang nga so ha ko yo res re ba la ko tsek pena da di tsek de la ten che ni sem jowa tong sem de gi top ji go ni Trada, Longda, Saman, you are tongue to be so chitanga, 책 좀나 빼마 세게 누바 치모 요래 데나 이 책 독자 람나 코 독자 차히 여바당 양코 빼 야고지 람나 양 코랑 게 빼지 차다 롱데 소야 야 펜도 조트야 다디 코 책랑 그 누바 찍라 데디제 야그레스 나소.
And so I think maybe some of you don't understand precisely what even a mantra is, or what I mean when I say the word mantra. And so we should think about it in this way. So just for example, think about how if you use some kind of really harsh speech, some bad words towards someone, how just from that kind of bad expression or, kind of bad words, that can actually change someone's mind. And so even just by them changing their mind, think about how that also can have an effect on their subtle energy, that is their breath and their blood pressure and so forth. And then conversely, we can think about, how, positively or, on the other side, how when we say something wholesome or soothing to someone, how that can actually have a calming effect, even on the physical body as well as on the mind. So think about how what we're really talking about when we say mantra is that we're talking about the power of a word or a sound to have some transformative effect. And so that's first example I just want to give is just, even if we're just talking about ordinary words, they have that kind of transformative power. So don't even think about mantra yet. That's just thinking of the power of words themselves. And so there have also been, scientific research done and some books published about, the transformative power that words have even upon the crystallization of water. So I don't know if you've looked into this, but there's been research done where just by saying, pleasant words and unpleasant words to water and then examining like the crystal patterns of those, that it can have these transformative effects. And so it's not only on, that it can have a transformative effect on a person or something, but even on physical forms, substantial kind of physical objects. Thus, even words can have an effect on those.
And the digit mama benedict that jagani de hakot the segler than the niba the hakoje. And it tender would take you drop the net as a tankilla. Ladder young dig take the nibachimu chakure. That tendije and it may you zong chechini. Ani dig take the digit lana, paduma de la pember shoe, some genie did take the zuya de gala. That they love the any padu de la penet on the word. That they young take the la jetang take the maimba, koya, casere, zelab jing the take. Digit learning as a mantra say.
And so then when we talk about a mantra, then what we're talking about are these words that have been kind of created in a way by someone who had done a lot of kind of spiritual training and practice to a point where their speech, carried a lot more power, like they had more influence over people through their speech. And so then what they would do is they would come up with this mantra, and they would kind of bless that mantra in a way where they would say, may it be the case that whoever recites these words gain this or that effect or whatever, this or that benefit. And so in that way, those words become kind of blessed with that power. So they're not just an ordinary word anymore. They're now a word that has been blessed with some kind of power to have some kind of transformative effect. And that's what's meant by the word mantra.
Nga rangna amahiba nga da me chu thuptham rawchi this jini nyam che gwe ji dang ani thamala ta ti kencha rawchi jong sumba ina ya te du e gadu ina phagila ta kanga da dunga te ra mahiba che chini yang ji semba soya ge ta tham raw tin de mangbo yore thab raw tin de mangbo che ki yore ta ti ta de song ye dini ramba ki de ma shi ge ins
chencha sen akar se borela
Jenge ben Mashwala Soba Tavidang, Tachi Yoravala de Jalava Mashwa, Tachi Gazet, Mombuchan Todu, so.
And then so in the middle, when people are actually sick, then we don't merely rely upon medicine. We don't merely rely upon the power of mantras and so forth, spiritual methods, but we combine them both. We accomplish them both, as best we can. And then when we meet with any kind of, unfortunate circumstance, adversities due to the illness, then we have many different methods of, consolation or many other ways of shifting our perspective, not merely thinking of the problem as a problem, but different ways of viewing or having a different kind of perspective of the situation. And so those are some of the methods that I want to talk about tonight. So I'm going to talk about that.
Yeah. Ani tarida here the jik thongta pasam da ujita. Ropes and the
So that's just kind of a general presentation, of like kind of what they would do at the beginning of a situation, in the midst of a situation, and ultimately when they're being affected by the situation or so forth.
Oh, la so. Anita, tendere ta, kase ungo ta, jik pena jengen da ujita, nge dini ma re in the hiena, ta jik. Pena that nambi chug to the nyamle jenge jina. Da jenge da jenge the close chenny. Jenge de da jenge tumches that chela the digidorvala.
Oh,
la codeono that tendency cassette up and a jenge bada with Johnson Baina. The jenge corante ani Jigla Nuchi Swaina, Jigla Penta to Bendochi. That's some of the Congress. A charter with the country Jaki or Sena. Up in a Muti Pagilata, Jig Pijada, the Nichi Shaswanda, Ula Sopata with the Nichi Jumba in a young. And it dig jail at the genie, and it so good penatic, ta, same nanga. Ta nyamle lab ya ji pen da nge ta da dwal nga so loma mangbo ji de ta da nam ju ji nyamle ta hin ni dang lam thong do ji lab de gi yor wala ta ye ta de so pe de ni ka si hira ge de ni ko pe ya ji chemo do ji ro to ya ji pha ju ni me ji ji shan do ya la so ba ta ji la do da cha ge yor de nang sam ge nang ni pe hin ni de so tan do ba lam thong de so pe zai do ba ta zo de lam thong de the nigga be shook check tangini, Gachenji same nangdana, Pagila ten pen to watch. Oh, that the religion is over yours.
And so in the Buddhist tradition, we have a saying that is, taking adversity as a friend or as a helper. And what that means is that when some kind of adverse circumstance happens, one difficult situation happens, even though that problem is, harming or negatively affecting things from one side, we can also use that situation to be of benefit in some other way. And so let me give you an example. Like if someone died, or let's say, we had some kind of like, some serious economic loss or something like that, some serious circumstance happened, that as a result of that, that dig anchi chen de la teni anchi cloud tong ya nyamne shu cheru drongen de drotang da which country de la anchi take out which lam ne tes chi go de woman do ana
ta pe na chi de do chi ba la ta de le ten chi ni yin jong chi che pe na nga so ta da nam ja ge na lo la ta ti zo ba ra ten shi ne de zo ba ra ten de ani pa wa ma ge thu chi ni jagal ro gi se chi ni ma thu ni yung du ka la khong pu ge do wa Ani takes a tapema kuji long the Tawache. Ani jig Amadwal Shasudua, Bala Amatesol Shasudua. Ani Kong that the one jig Yamne Cheja Ducala petting, Munitranicata, Hal Leagata, the Zabara Tensen, Lama, Hal Leagata Chemo. Touching Nangata, Yamdu Nasmani, Samatzar Zone. Tended over the Chasum Yado.
And so, by using the power of that loss to reinforce one's commitment. For example, I can give you an example of how that could serve as a factor in, increasing the power of one's practice. So we have one teacher in our lineage, in our Namchak lineage, named Zoparabten. And his family was, leading him out of Tibet as refugees. And they they escaped to Pemaku, is a place near Arunachal Pradesh, eastern Tibet near the Tibet border, eastern India near the Tibet border. And when they got there, his father and mother both got ill, both had high fevers and passed away. And, that led him to a deep spiritual yearning, a sense of renunciation with this, world of suffering, where that power kind of drove him to this practice where he completely perfected the power of his meditation practice. And so in that way, he was able to use a negative circumstance as like an empowering kind of condition for his own life and his own practice.
That's Ani pamanika hya pugu yelu re ta popomu hya ani koso be de chama da ji sen jo no jongjin de da ji chulen jokje an ji cha no du ga la da ji ma koso chama la chen ye cha jin da popomu ye de lama pe chen bo ye cha ani kono song ga khang ba de go ba zu ji ni da ke ja se gi ne ji bro yong zu la de ani go ba da ke da che hyu no da ke da pe cha ta ri de Tene kosola jimata ramba jinda tuku yore ta te tere ti popomo yete yangjar tene tendes jinda pe chamoda chaya ta tende mambo yore sela.
And like another example is there's a family named Gechak in Tibet, and they had 4 kids, two some boys and girls, but anyway 4 kids. And both of the parents passed away. And, as a result of that, all 4 of the kids decided to, go deeper into this spiritual journey. And they both became, all 4 of them became, very influential, very powerful, very realized spiritual teachers, masters, lamas, that is. And they ended up building a nunnery where the site of their old house was. And that's one of the most famous nunneries in Tibet. And so, and gradually there's like a tradition even of recognizing the reincarnations of these 4 children. They're quite renowned spiritual teachers. Listen.
And morang tata di ta chuche kine ze drapin zene te ya tra ani jik ta ngune trane ge jik ta nang la samotana ane te ta jik nguni sanji re sena jik nye ge lab na ya lab ma thab me ba so do tende jik ko message chavre ta jik te ngarang la min la yonge ji res.
And if I think about one of my teachers, Zene Senekar Segurela.
Tan zene sene da jik zubol mare ne ta ngama ine me juni mere la ta te pela ta de ta ze se mambo jik le ne se ka chen de phuk chani jong te teni pha sa cha bed mu chan me sal khang ba zo pha ya ya ma
that's
te tana shelo de khang ba mari ni ma to role thok lo ma ta te da wore
that's
ma go ni ta khang ba ri go ta
So there's one of my teachers, a nun named Anitsepak, and she had a really terrible illness. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I think it was leprosy. This is me speaking, not Khen Rinpoche. He knows what it is. I don't know the translation of the particular illness. He said it's an illness that's so bad, it's a skin illness, that when you get it, they just send you off alone into the mountains. You build your own little hut and live there the rest of your life. And after they die, people don't dare to touch the body, but they just destroy the house on top of the body because no one dares to touch it. So I think it might be leprosy. But anyway, that illness drove this nun into a life of, solitary practice where she accomplished her practice of this Buddha named Avalokiteshvara and was cured of the illness. And, it's one of the type of situation where I would have to admit that she had, in her mind had fully like become a Buddha. And that's one of my teachers personally.
Yeah. And that this zone the chick ta caseta tendriki namta hunanda, Hitso Yomata, Javini, Lama Mong Chevachi, Kanganda with a tray. And DJ and tending in Jung Chechen, and a chita nang pagita, you're dead. You need semapa.
And so there's no way for me to tell you of all these stories. There are so many, famous, spiritual teachers, masters of both ancient India and Tibet who, through the condition of, meeting with some kind of adverse circumstance, they use that to kind of empower their practice and attain, really incredible development of spiritual qualities.
다 같이 가르치고 있는 도드나 동화라 동화시 아니 진짜 이 동화데 매바지니 준주는 동에 다 이게 대시에 요레스
La.
동화라 동화시 시제
Mhm.
아니 동화 곡턱이 냠내 제운데 다 지마데서라 다 동화 주는 매바지니 파다 다 같이 이 된디기다 다지 중간다고 지 몽부지레스라.
And so what I'm getting at here is that there are a lot of these people who kind of recognize their own suffering, and then after experiencing and recognizing that suffering for themselves, they made strong efforts at, preventing suffering from coming again in the future, to the point where they were able to completely eliminate their suffering.
알았어. 다 대지 추근오니다 쟁엔데 라땡제네 아니 제동 다 제게스다데.
So that's one way that, adversity is dealt with or worked with within Buddhism.
아니다 제 젬바 근문이 제 상노 방송에다 쟁에 베나 다단 드르더고질 땡제니 아니 지다 닌제데 공패스 땅제데 나서 엠근나로라 닌제데 공패 땅에 다 대베나 소가다다 투그레 요네 냠네 첨부들 고고요 말레스 대 송자지 소소소소가 강한데 소소소소라야 문이 다니기 닌제 아니 대나게 지금 링크가 제 강한데 소다라 파 다운도 갈라 아니 소소라지 시다 고마그 제제니 랑이 그때는 닌제 제제니 그때는 차우는 거요레스.
And thinking of our present circumstance, we can really use this as an opportunity or a condition for really increasing the power of our compassion. That's something that we can do now, even without having some very, very high levels of practice, of meditation practice. And so, we can consider our own suffering and develop, compassion, and see our own suffering with that wish to free ourselves, that wish to be freed from suffering, that sense of compassion for our own suffering. And then we can look outwards to the entire world, and even without any kind of serious kind of meditation practice, just by considering our own situation and then considering, the difficulties and the problems of everyone else in this world, then we naturally have this arising of compassion, this welling up of compassion within us.
아니 다 닌게제나 다 펜토 가르요리세 세나 다 가세데 나소 다다 니고 강한데야 되니 텍스지 팽그레스 가세 다다 나소 니고 강한데 녜게 카종야 몽보 히에데와이 가세 강한데다 나라닝게 발라 마도 삼노 나소 남기 땅투고 요 말했다. 나 파기 뭐지 만팀바 차나야다 코 파기를 파다디 뭐된 통 쳇다디 나랑 강아디 통 디닝게 발라 꼬라 지베지 뭐도 디니 셈바판 로토고면도 왔어. 대나기 다다 나소 강한데라 데 차기요랬다. 닝게 생엔데 지 가세리 옌다지를 메이체니 옌다 참말 파 메인데 다들 닝게 첨보도세나 찔러 파지 메고는 닝게 첨보 차도세. 대지운데 셈바데파 대가라는 코페 자체를 놓차랬다. 대가랑 파 자체를 놓차디 니거고디 펜토고요레 소소라.
And so you may ask, so what's the point or what's the benefit in developing compassion? And so, it can definitely be of benefit even in our immediate circumstance, in our immediate sense of our, difficulty of dealing with the situation. Because ordinarily, I was discussing this last week in our teachings on Sunday. Ordinarily, when we're having a difficulty, our mind just gets stuck contemplating that difficulty, that situation, that adverse circumstance. And we're just stuck in the cycle of our mind and the object of this, our thinking of this difficulty or our situation, and just being stuck in a cycle like that. Like, for example, if we get into an argument with a person, then we just have our own kind of image of that situation or of that person in our mind, and then us, and we're just kind of stuck in the cycle of reconsidering and considering that situation. But when we turn that attention outwards to compassion, then we have a different avenue of thought. We can escape that cycle. And then when we talk about great compassion, then instead of just thinking of compassion for one, we think of a compassion that spreads outwards to all. And when we do that, it really opens our mind in a way that really kind of spreads our mind out. It really opens our mind out and expands our mind outwards away from our own small like focus on this problem. And just that itself is very beneficial, to our current state of mind.
Da pena nga so jik ting sang ore ya nore dangbo dange de ninje de pa hie ni de dan chu ji ni hie na de sa.
Less.
Da ni de des je ni da so su ju la ninje de de shuk che wan da bo ji jong ba ina. Ani da so so ge ju la da ji cha da long ga de so ko dong de la pe hira ge ju ban ro ku du se ne ting sang lo ku do. Bi ka se de den ba ngu ni de 소소 셀 팽이요레 롱 팽이요레 차라 팽이요레 찌찌레 팽이요레라 멀라양 파 펜토요레 가시 멀 파기라다 가르 구구두스네 무데솔라 찌 고야데 잠바다 쩨와디 궁엔데 땅아서 무 청마다지 레리 도와다 찌 텐데 송다 빼는 나다딜라 찌 잠바다 쩨와 땡게지나 우니 다니데 나랑 가그도와 나라 데도 메데 고구도와다 that zamba that zewa mtenge chi ina tela ngaso ta ka se gakmdwa pena da ti zasong ji imba ina ya soso la zamba da zewa tenge de zo tela gagudwa de wo ji ni soso la zamba zewa de che chaung de mula tende pentu chimbo yores.
And so it's been proven these days in research on meditators that developing compassion is beneficial for your blood pressure, for general like health, like your heart health, in terms of your blood pressure and the movement of your breath, like calming down your breath, which has a direct effect on your blood pressure and your circulation. And it's not only beneficial to your physical health, it's also beneficial to the other people in your life. It's beneficial to people, because what is it that people actually need? People need love, people need care. And they really like and they really need people who care for them, people who love them and show them care and concern. And they don't like people who don't give them love and concern, or they're, disinterested with such things. And so that's what's needed, in a relationship, in a couple, in any kind of relationship. What's needed is love, concern, and care. And so, it's definitely true that the more we develop the compassion, the more we are able to share that love and care and concern.
Ani nga jesa dabala di trungru jingla trungba grupa dabala ani daba nga da di kasire yabu hidigal mo trong chasha ta gemo ji ta pe mangbo na denge jo sare ba pe namjun te se de mo khashi mangbo ne ba cha de do mo de ji sare ba ai mora gunda ma mani gu mon cha somre si jinin rowa sim tamje ge naki chaki chobar shu sine ngaso gaddi ina ta phaje pemu khal den jadde ta naya ge kala 다 해야게 깔란다고 파 매바 차버슈 ndawo 직 로와 심제 탐지 나키 차키 생인데 띠지 나르드네 뇽니 데드네 파 쳬버슈 ndawo 랍데네 직 남주 칸 히에데 지어다 버메데 다 던데 지어레 아니 아마 데기 직 군다 타버레킨 차슴데 시데 랍니드네 마니 효사레바 아니 뿌기 지어사레다 띠코 데 고데기도와 Deji code, and Nimaji Pugati code Jalulma Tanyong Jin, da Ama Naiva Tumba Yimba Hako, where three Ama Kandos Tidoa. Nido Sedose, Nani Nisha says, Yinda in says, draw Simje Tam, Jig Naki Taki Morang Kogo Yarabas. Yinda is a Pugati.
Pugati Lasayela.
Oh, Pugati didn't love to say.
So there's one lady who I was friends with in my village back in Tibet, and she was an older woman, and she was often quite ill. And every night before she would go to bed, she would make 3 prostrations at her altar and make a prayer that said, may all the sufferings, may all the sicknesses, and, may no living being ever have to experience, sickness or death. May I, take that from them or something. And so, this is like a common kind of prayer that Tibetans make. It's really just like stuck in their minds, stuck on their mouths, these kind of prayers. And so every night when she was going to bed, she would say that prayer 3 times. And, she had a kid, and the kid went outside one day and was talking to the other people in the village. And someone in the village said to him, how's your mom? And he said, oh, she's at home sick in bed. And then the kid said, of course she's sick at home in bed. She's got to carry the sickness and death of all of these, all living beings. She's got to carry all of their sickness. So of course she's asleep in bed.
Oh, that thing that was charged. You don't chew no hear about the partial Mamonga de color that in Jadder. Tamji, get under was simply Tamji saying that you part Mibanda would just symbol that you tongue. Oh, that in Jadder is.
And so this kind of view, even is stuck, in the mouths of Tibetans. They're always making these kind of prayers, this kind of, looking out towards the general kind of concern for on a much more broad or vast scale.
That's so. And then, they don't think about what you hear by in a tap and a target child, some time by now. They also that Mambuchi. We meet Tranic Taco, Zamble and kill some tongue. That Mambuchi bedding in the town, the pay, that is some mountain road to us. Pay mountain road. So ben papa take down our cake or papa taking many some of Pansuma in a ha leg mango. That was Chagdo. That Nama Teso Deso, Pache ya, Mohi or Mareta. Come mamma no la chick pa, you ding and Rajimato, so, galley some tongue dingers on Romato, jealous some tongue dingers on the. These chick, you know, men are some sons of douch. Tendeji yore, that day in the chick. So I'm too good nanula chick. That chabra is on the moncha, do and I would say then around, coding is sort of charting door. That thing song didn't that chick to the tanguni, Mayako. Kill some tongue, Mamona some tongue. That casse mamboya tongue. That day uncle Ninja Tati, Ninja. Co Ninji imbuts on the partial. Ninji music called Lale Tange, was.
And if we think of our, present situation, we can see quite a lot of people, or we're becoming a lot more aware of, more and more people who are, coming out and showing and expressing and doing helpful things on this for the greater good, as a result of our present situation. In the past, I'm sure there were some people like this, but they didn't really show themselves and we weren't really aware of them. I can think just oh, no. And so, like for me, I'm always, talking to other Tibetans because that's the language I can speak. So I hear news from Tibetans and I'm always asking people. And so, it seems that, a lot of people who are doing a lot of good and expressing a lot of good in the world are kind of showing themselves more and more because of this present circumstance. And in the past, it was always the case that, many more people were much more concerned with their own situation. And it was much more rare to even see anyone showing any concern or any kind of doing any work for the greater good. And, and when you look at the news, ordinarily, most of what you always see is just bad news all the time, bad situations. Whereas now, if you look at the news, you can see, news and reports of a lot of people doing a lot of good in the world. And, and so we can really see that. And, that itself is a show of compassion, and not just the thought of compassion, not just the wish for beings to be freed from suffering, but the actual direct actions. People are taking direct actions in order to, show some kind of compassion or do something to alleviate suffering.
And Drangala Gangala the video Tangcho. Takariche the city, Nepal and Nalo Niata, Neg Masha Koni, Kala Mechini, share gyan ka dos.
Mm-hmm.
Riba? And this on the Kosogata did Sopati, so do what Pagin never. And a border singing the Bala Jake, Papa Shingus and Jake, Magi Jasakil, Namada, Panguda Woda, the Joe Mambo Caval Desa, the soul among the so mutant the Mambo Jonathan the Rock Jenny, Kosog Kala Soche. And tell Jinda date and Pagini train out Jinda Chegi. Sanning a Jinda Chins, Koso tended in this Chechinita, but the Kokala Zochin that day. Oh, Tendrig up a Shukchamushuji and that thing's on Lenge Shukchamushuji to say.
And so, like, I have an acquaintance named Achadroka in Nepal. She sent a video to me of people in Nepal who, they're saying that many people in Nepal are more likely to die of famine, of starvation, than they are to actually die of this illness. And so they've, made an association where a lot of people, a lot of young people and so forth are going to the different parts of Kathmandu, to Bodhanath and to Swayambhu and to, to the main part of the city, anywhere where the homeless people congregate, anywhere where there's large groups of homeless people. And they're all, have an association for cooking and providing meals for all these people. And then different people in the community are taking turns, cooking and also providing the resources, being the sponsor for each day's meal. So one day maybe I would be the sponsor, and then the next day someone else would say that they would take on that responsibility. So anyway, they've developed this organization in the midst of this pandemic.
No. Yeah, Penna, that Pedro would in this Chechini, that Koro. And the Gana Ying it up Pagiti, Jarag and Nanula, young member this group Checheni. Any member this Ota, Mambutse, Tsukasakan, member group Che, and it also Kawa and Nakadona, telephone with Naloni parts of Rupachiak. That magic Pagili Yayachi, telling Revachi, any digita Kasakan member Nepa, so telling Revachi. Then Kasaka member Churung to Sukadi, Churung to Sukadi, member so Suzuki Lega ready check for a deeper drink me. That is over.
And also in India, there's a big organization that's been started between the doctors, so that people are able to call in and talk to the doctors, and then the doctors are able to make connections between each other in order to, in the midst of all their other work, to be able to help out in other ways and be able to help off in the midst of all their other responsibilities.
Lazo that tela soba that pe that penanga so the soni chenamba get someone tong jere member den de pa ta lega la di gomba hutsange de so set lab jeni ta da ji mamang de da la ya set lab ni lega chenge kase mong bu do ba nga so di ko jakam ta kon zambeling la
gomba shungen sena
da penanga ma di retirement chi sei mi de la.
Oh, that's Hako-san. And look at how many examples you can see of people in the medical professions who, even though they had already retired, returned to work to help out during the pandemic. So we can see a lot of these kind of wholesome and positive examples of action, compassionate action.
So, and they in the Tati Pesha young and so Tangi Tata in the Chico love Shishimando, love Guamando, Tetinita, Pesha young and so Mamanga, man. Casedo with Uncle. Then it all Lahi young and the member the Sotamje, the member the nasty so Leah get up a shoji check it was it.
And so, as I don't need to say each and every individual account, but anyway, a lot of very wealthy people are making big contributions to different kind of funds and different kind of helpful associations, medical funds and so forth. And many people with these, particular skills that are needed in these situations, doctors, nurses, and so forth, are really going above and beyond and doing everything they can.
Ani ta pena nga ge ta di chi khatong tangbo chi ta dwala ba pomo chi ge ani dwala chi tangso ani nge di namjun che na bal tengi yo ka se ta khatong ni yo tangbo na sa lu du ka la ya di nas chi re do pomo chi ba pomo chi an da morang sha ta di chi na cha di phu di khamba no ya zu go do morang dana ya zu cha di nima yiba di tu la chi morang dang de ne ka se chi choga da pu de ne sa no mai ba momong che la ani churong so tarong di ka se chi lo so jap chi ni churong so tarong gar go hu do na ngal de na sol de ba che yu si korong so me yeb de zo yu si mo de si ni ma ke jam ni de chi nang de do wa.
And there's another, Tibetan girl who's a nurse in New York City. And when the illness first spread in New York, I keep showing people this video, but she actually contracted the coronavirus at work in the hospital and had to stay in quarantine. And by the 4th day of her quarantine, then she was, directly like engaging with people like through the phone and through videos and so forth, trying to give people advice on the virus and telling people about her symptoms and like what's going to happen, what they need to do to prepare, what they need to do to prevent, and so forth.
And churong so ga du yin na de ba che yu si do.
She said, told people to anyone who's experiencing any symptoms or has any questions, to directly contact her, and gave out her contact information to make sure that people could reach someone with actual experience and knowledge of the situation.
Oh, la so ta tin do wo de re ta nga so ta de do wo ta pe ta da ngun si che zambel leng ti thu ta na ngun ta le ka leng en de so la sam no ta ne nga so dig lo che ra ya ta. Uni ta ne nga so yang chi din na yin chi le sam no tang che ne mo ba la sem yo chi ta wi somebody zona ti nga so lo la pe pe thu de sta.
And if we can, look at these examples of all these people doing all this great work in the world, then we can really gain some inspiration from that. And we can actually, gain an inspiration that can, help us to develop some more courage and some more power within us. So we have a lot that we can learn, a lot that we can gain, and a lot that we can benefit by really, hearing this and looking to their examples.
Oh, so I think khatsong dwa ji tada ngi loma alma se je khong la ta ji chö gi den do kha shi tang gu si lai min de do mo le ka ya wo cheng de ani dwa ji america na lo ni nga la ji den de cheng o so mo tang song de ka se nga se jung me en ta da shi shi men do pe di ka se pe mo tang kya si.
So I talked to Alma, who's one of my students, and asked her to send me some more like news reports or more situations of people who have been helping out in the situation in America and so forth. And she sent me a lot of information, a lot of examples, but I didn't have anyone to translate them for me, so I don't know exactly what it is.
Okay. Ta ka cheng ta ta kar shu ko de na. Muni den de do jin tong de nga so semba de pa hyam do na ya to gu do. Muni ta ne nga so di din zambleng de ta ta du da sam san da chi.
And when we look at these kind of examples, then our mind, which has become kind of fearful and closed off, really kind of develops this inspiration and this courage, doesn't it? Really, our own kind of like sense of suffering, our own little individual suffering. When we look to these examples of these people doing this good work, it really clears that away and really brings something up in us, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it dig it that thing I hang and chinaba yang and get a ready hen do chons. Only turning us a mong, but the dowchick tanga so moose upon Joyona, da menanda, lahi yonanda, menanda, same show queerty, pay carchamoreas. And it didn't with it, non ruchena, pay up do somebody around Senate Hatini, and it cut on it in the Shaggy.
And so, this is something that I really wanted to make sure that I told everyone is that, that we need to, take this example and kind of think of this, that, if, people, when we have something to offer, when we have money, for example, we should try and help out in that way. If we have skills, we should try and help out in that way. And even if we don't have any of those things, then we should keep our wholesome intention, our positive outlook, and our kind of mental courageousness. And we need to to keep that. And so that's why, you know, I thought about this the other day, and this is why, you know, I wrote that down, that this is something that I wanted to talk about to all of you.
That deep chugun no la karhe yo se munjun dambi nam tarsi jito ki nyamnes that that did nam tan no shogun no ti yemi ke cha ma de na so phagin ngus thongku do as ambare se di logic kan ba te ngaso ge te nyamne te res.
And so, like within the Buddhist tradition, we say that we have the kind of spiritual, you know, biographies or the life stories of these like holy beings, and that becomes the practice of us as the followers of their tradition. And so it doesn't matter if this isn't written down as an actual like story or biography. These accounts of these people doing good things in the world, you know, they are, you know, doing that good work, and that becomes something for us to learn and something for us to train and something for us to aspire to.
And the Pagidati Jaga Solata Gomba Yongete Suk Jaga Yong at the Rupachido, Nadela Rupachido, the Kolo Yevig, and it Kala Mangete Rupachido. This Dada Gomba, this Yosaga such a desert, Kesson Chadivisondo, Lomba, the Dido with the Chadido.
And so there are many, you know, Buddhist monasteries in India, and those monasteries are doing a lot of work to help the states that they're in, like the actual state, the local community that they're in, providing food to the homeless and the impoverished and so forth. So it's really becoming very advantageous for those places to actually have Buddhist monasteries in them, because those, you know, monks and lamas are actually doing a lot of direct action work.
And it cuts on that Almagik Tangjati, Jacob the Kavarese got the Danga the Takaina Jake said that Tavala the member Jake, the Kangban on the Neba, you got a Pandro Hudua. Up in the Neba Jake the Ba. So Kangban on that none in Yidur. Orang pan rojini, kangban on the pan rojini, me jake doa. Remember, I did the chinnaman tondo. They tend to gala, they jig dini, tendency shade on, they tend to gala jig, Mama, that narang pala de ta, see a trancho. That Mama did this shade to go up, Perny, say never the only Nisa Yamata pan rogorba. And other tender which in Unitani and that in Roma of Salta, tended never Pando in the watching it and one.
So one of the news stories or the examples that Alma sent me, I don't remember what country this was in, but you know, it was a story of one doctor who he himself is going directly to the homes of people who are infected and treating people in their homes. And when I heard that story, just immediately I had like a flash of memory of my father back in Tibet, because back in Tibet, what my father did as a Tibetan doctor, you know, when in the Tibetan medical system, you know, you just have your home, and sick people don't come to your home because there's nowhere for them to actually, like, if they need long-term treatment, they don't have anywhere to lay down. There's nowhere for them to sleep. And so the doctor goes to their houses and goes into the homes of, you know, the patients. And so it's like that, where this doctor is actually going into the homes of coronavirus patients, going directly to them and treating them in their own spaces.
Italy.
Oh, in Italy.
Oh, Italy. They did this chair down. Ani digging the danga so tata did the chair la. Yenda Majona yang danga so GC rang sage. Young number chair, GC rang sage. GC rang said, pay carchambore. Kasi Namjunga sola tradu singing the yota, tradu de go GC rang yuru cheki o mare. Tata didiki yago cheng the sola tanga so Yenda Majona pe. Tradu maybe Tojigoni, sorry maybe Tojigoni. Tell it samba number tabigoni GC rang chebaina. Tell it give a chamber which taco 2 killing ya. Tell a huge it's a yore.
And so another, you know, practice that we work with in Buddhism is that, you know, even if we are not able to do anything directly in terms of some kind of direct action of benefit, one thing that we consider extremely important is to rejoice in the good works of others. And so normally in our mind, we always have this kind of jealousy, envy, or competitiveness, which just doesn't allow us to actually feel a sense of rejoicing or a sense of joy at the goodness, at the good deeds of others, or at the any kind of positive actions of others, because we're always comparing or competing or feeling jealousy or envy about that. And so, as for someone who actually does believe in the teachings of the Buddha, in the Dharma, we consider it to be of an extremely great amount of merit. It's extremely meritorious, extremely wholesome to really purely rejoice in the good deeds of others with no sense of jealousy or competitiveness or envy or anything like that.
So, that they gonna young more says young that puggy mugget in the Yapo Cheba de Dangarang give an it's a teddy pong jenny. Da same yendala watch it. Monaja, what in this chair to the yours?
And the Karigadundalangoa, the Leachi.
Benimutisuguta, Tata Leka, the Dicolata, Yapo Cheng, so the Gevate make Jenny. So the Gevate. They don't arang give any dom chini, didn't pa? Watch it.
Ready, Cardilangoa, Chig Labore Indila.
Jig did not a June chair in and data. The chair in and draw, Lomba Yapo Yunga in and data, the soul didn't put this.
And then another, important practice for us is what we call dedication. And what that means is that you consider, kind of the wholesomeness, the virtue of this positive action that others have done, together with whatever wholesome kind of virtues that you have done. And you consider those together, like all of these positive actions together, all the merits of that together. And you dedicate that. You say, like, may this wholesome action, may this merit become the cause of, for example, all of these, living beings to not experience illness, for this pandemic to be extinguished, for the country to regain its prosperity, for whatever kind of benefit, so you think of that, that merit, that wholesome, energy of all of these positive actions of others and yourself, and bring them together. And you say, may all of this become, a cause for, may all of this be the source of benefit, and so forth, and think of it in that way.
Okay. That rain bed, Sarito Mambo, that would chas on young Chenabati, Goyan Tomenda with Chaki and Rose.
And
my duty young days, take a hidden on my duty here in
And so maybe I'm talking a little too scattered right now, and it's becoming a little hard to understand. So I'm going to give you a little kind of condensation of what I've been trying to say here.
Okay. That turned that jig and then you get your own son like that he need a lamp on love you a day. Annie, that the suit that you did gabla, Annie, Yamlan Nana. Then you tango here the data. They got the up in Yamlan, so you would charity, cinema kashi, pete and the Nitahegi, pete and which Jenny, Chinos Yamsland don't it is.
And so, the first point that I was talking about taking adverse circumstances and using them as a source of kind of developing power for your practice, I was directing that towards those of you who have already received kind of other meditation teachings. Like, for example, from me, maybe you've received teachings on calm abiding and special insight, shamatha and vipassana. And so we can use, this situation as an opportunity when we have time, in order to develop our practices of meditation. So that was my first point.
Ani ta nipala ani rang jula ta tari kangan de thongni esi inje dia phetgachi tende taki nams ibate.
And then the second one was by looking at your own situation, at your own sense of difficulty or suffering or whatever, looking at your own mind to use that as a source for developing compassion. And that was the second point.
Ani ta samba de la ya ta ya bo jeng ge ta de ye ta de so ka se top top ji chen nye je ji di ge nam tha na yin ji so so ge ro tu ya la se pyo ji ya lo jang ya go tin de ji ya.
And then the third point was to try to read, try to see all of these examples of people that are doing helpful things in the world, and to try and use that as a source of inspiration and courage for yourself, and as a way to kind of train your mind to follow in their footsteps, to use that as an inspiration for you.
Anita Yibatela ta Tradum Bachi Ani tele Jisi Yerang Chechin, Tanguni Gania, O Tendestini, Teda Lady Noa. They saw the Jibatan Nankos.
And then the next one was to, not to feel any sense of, jealousy or envy or competitiveness towards the wholesome deeds, but to actually genuinely rejoice in those good deeds, and to try and dedicate all of the sources of virtue, all of these wholesome actions and virtues, towards some kind of positive ends.
Then young Jig, that's Tabaji Tikal Hunata, Ben and Nambada Wuchi Baina. Semki singing. Singing the Semki. Semki said, didn't we come on the tongue bigabla? Then he ta Mount Palata, Semki, Tamki Dongandi, Nigi Sevaji, Zoginda, Sevik Pen, Tamja Tembo Yachi. And Nambaji in that Jeva Mambuch killing here. Now, Muntu Jenny, Tadam Yenaga the Niching, Nega the Niching. Semjeng donga said Zotugre Sabi Yechi Tamja da Jibigoni and it is Jenny Ninja Chibigun Tamja Cheva in that tell Semji say. Pay the independent Chambojires.
And then if you are an actual practicing Buddhist, we have a practice which is called generating bodhicitta, generating the mind of enlightenment. And so what that means then is that for us, we look at the suffering, this difficult circumstance and suffering, and we look at that and we think that I'm going to commit myself to be able to actually eliminate all of the suffering of the world, of all living beings. And you make a stable kind of personal commitment to do that. And as Buddhists, we believe that that there are multiple lifetimes, and that we will continue to work towards that goal of eliminating the suffering of others, continuing into the future. And we have to believe that we can do that. We have to have a trust in ourselves and a commitment, a sense of commitment that we are committing ourselves towards that purpose. Mm-hmm. And when we make such a commitment out of a mind of great compassion, there's a lot of, very great benefit that comes from that.
Okay. Teni ta nge mangbo shudene tere yakundu. Teni ta jima tela ngaso 남주지 내다 목에다 마토께서 파체지 냠도 용등에서 나오지요. 근데 손자 다다리가서 운이지 샘바 야고디 랑다 랑마이베 옌다라 파카세지 제펠다오지 땅터바이나 아니지 잠란 시대 용야라페 텐독 첨보요래.
And so it's often, commonly the case that that illness, famine, and war kind of come together, that they happen simultaneously or within the same kind of, in the same time periods. And so as much as we can develop some wholesomeness, not just in ourselves, but actually try to spread that outwards and try and actually increase the power of that by spreading it out to our community, to people around us and further, then that's of really great benefit in such troubling times.
Oh, lasata tati ge joke to wala ya ta ngage and tatari muni kita tendrige chali zambot nang denge ke phagita memba inandra tendrik ba inandra chokda pamjo yo nge inandra lahi yo nge inandra teni kita Zambele kill some funding at Inanda, the Karinanda, that Tamchi, Laji, Muniji, Narang, Muniata, Tugiches, Hinendauchi, that then it goes on set.
And then to conclude this, I really wanted to first, or to say really a great thank you to everyone who is working in this world everyone who is really working hard in order to do something helpful in the world right now, to all of the doctors, to all of the, the generous donors, the people who are making, kind of financial offerings and so forth, all of the scientists, all of these people with particular skills, and even just the people who are trying to be considerate of the situation of the world, people who are, really thinking of the world outside of just their own circumstance, and just say thank you to everyone.
That didn't know what you around say no la thing, Pache John Mason singing Pemangure. Tangaram said no la did we take that Ganga Segumarvella. Tata but the John Mason singing Mambodo. That day we Jimson carried city, American Rawachinata. Pamjo Yaku decor, carrying at Samaji Ganga maybe Zonda which is it. And they change so get Zobda which Kaya. Manawanda with the drinking Yamante, Chipo de Sanya Yore, there was some day. They this him Yanni young day at the Digidua. That Mahum Balati, oh, Takangachi, you could do that. Telati Songji get up and so Pamjo inanda, Leka inanda, Chikarina, Chikadeki go do the Sambadachi. They take the name, Yonata Yakundu take those. Touching around Berkonda, which he said.
Someone said that there was a disconnect there, so I just that the Leanchik Trajatis Chesong Yanji love good.
So
no, Kenam say Chesung Mare. Napa love the Chesonsa.
So when a pechana di Yanatachi Mumomboji Pehanda would say Yona Yanko Nyartukum Tuala. Tani chick the would you retire Taya Kaliko Chagduala. He's on the red penawiyana.
So someone said there was a little disconnect. So Khen Rinpoche just said in conclusion here, I thought, that I wanted to say thank you to everyone who is working towards doing something, helpful in this situation, whether that is doctors, scientists, skilled professionals, any kind of generous sponsors or donors, and even just people who are being considerate of the greater world situation and not just thinking of themselves. And so I wanted to thank everyone for that. And, another thing that, many people have been telling me is that, that this kind of situation just hadn't really happened in their lifetime. And, when I think about the situation in America, for example, it seems like, just on the surface that there aren't many big problems in America, and people just, kind of experience whatever pleasure they have today and just assume that that kind of pleasurable or kind of easygoing circumstance is going to be the same tomorrow. And now they're kind of seeing, and because of that, they're not very careful about their livelihood and careful about their circumstances. And so they just kind of go on assuming that the same situation is going to carry on, and are not really able to think about preparations for any kind of future problems or difficulties or whatever. And so now kind of seeing this kind of circumstance and seeing what can happen, I think it's important and useful for us to look at this and to kind of think about, how we need to be a little bit more prepared for these kind of things to happen in the future. For example, like many people aren't able to really hold on to any of their money. They don't have any kind of financial backup plan when these kind of circumstances happen. So it's important to also think about our present situation as a way to make us more prepared for these kind of situations in the future as well.
Oh yeah, that guy here general pen to some chenabage Travanda Yonachi Nangsel.
And so it's not going to be that helpful if I just keep on talking and talking. So if you all have any questions, you can go ahead and ask. So you could type questions in the chat here. Oh, chick de cheggy knock according to song knocking no paroch.
That's all.
And a digging knock de leanchic da puig tonia knock donia injig da chick knock donia chick de key koran la chick mixing in nupa yorabesa.
Oh, knock all the bala.
Rela. Petishana ngada inji da chigi anchik densik da chick no paroch ton son then a de leanchic chick chinjil up to kurbesa.
Oh, two grace.
And the Dutch ngar Dutch poig yang Sanskrit gitonian chinji labju de degarang da chik dig cake tonian dungur bela.
Oh, they go great.
That's it.
Sapena si pena inji jegi tene ma tsingi labni inji de drug to na di tsek di josona niba drug di josona niba mejul tsiki yore
Las
ma jaga ge tata di yenda tsama joy yare te pela te ngak tsek di kipu joy mari ta te yabre
so
yang pög tata densek to bi ganza khashi jegi de pög tsek khala rang ha zu yore yang te yang juju mari pe di drug kare ina te yago res.
And so there's a question back here about the language of mantra. And so I asked Khen Rinpoche, does it matter? And so the specificities of that are that, for example, so you said, does it matter Tibetan, English, or whatever? So the point is that if someone, like we were saying that, someone develops the power through their own spiritual practice to be able to empower these words, to make them into a mantra, to make them into a word that has the power of transforming something. And so if that person, did that through, the Sanskrit language or whatever, then that power resides in those words and those syllables. And so we don't change that. For example, when we translated all of the ancient texts from Sanskrit to Tibetan, we translated everything, but we didn't translate the mantra syllables. We pronounced them exactly as they were in Sanskrit. And then, for example, there are some people who accomplished that power of speech who were Tibetans, and they were able to make their own kind of mantras and bless those mantras themselves. And so similarly, if someone who was speaking English developed that same power, they could, also develop their own kind of like mantra that would have its power too. It just depends on, but you would never change that. You would say it exactly as it was produced by the person who produced it. That too, let me do that.
Alela so keba mana yesowas.
There's a good story here. Can they drong the song yebela?
Check the chisonda.
So they me pam remember shake loma de chen la karise wore.
Nini osar.
Nini osa.
Nini osar na nini osar ko keba tando dikala gepo che la.
So here's a story about the power of mantra. Khen Rinpoche told me to just go ahead and tell it because he's told it a bunch of times. So there's a guy named Mipam Rinpoche. He's a really important teacher in our lineage of Tibetan lineage of Buddhism. And he had a student named Nyime Woser. Nyene Woser. And so this guy had a really bad back. And he had a really bad back, and he went to Mipam Rinpoche and asked him if he had anything that he could do to help. So Mipam Rinpoche made this mantra and put it into a little pocket and told him to put it on his belt and strap it around his back. So after a while, Nyene Woser, his back got totally better, and he met this old man who had a bad back, and he said, "Oh, I've got the perfect thing for you. My teacher made this thing, for alleviating back pain." And so he gave it to the old man, but it didn't help him. And so after a while, Nyene Woser went back to Mipam Rinpoche and said, "Hey, that thing cured my back, but it didn't help this other guy." And Mipam Rinpoche said, "Of course it didn't help the other guy. I blessed it for you." And he opened it up, and the mantra said, Nyene Woser kepa manaye soha, or something like that. Anyway, it said, "May it be that Nyene Woser no longer has back pain." And so anyway, Mipam Rinpoche blessed it to have the power specifically to help him, but not just to eliminate back pain. And that's why it wouldn't help the other person, because his blessing of the mantra was for a specific purpose, only to alleviate the back pain of this particular individual. So that's an example. And so if there is a particular focus that the person who developed the mantra was focusing upon for this particular benefit, then that's the benefit it'll bring. If they were to make that of a more general benefit, like to benefit everyone that had a back pain, then that would be that. So it just depends on what the particular intention was when it was created. Khen Rinpoche nganso ge anche danda ge mixe de ge anche Tanda ki tutu dukcha dile yang anso ge mixig da dila pensig ngak da wachi dona yapu duesa. Dile yang che ngak ngato doya da wachi dani che naya yobesa.
Oh la so oh de sila.
So Chris asked, does Kempo have a mantra that may be good for all of us to say and use during this specific time? And he said, yes, I do.
Ani da tata chik kasem go da pyoge chik lama mambu chik da ta kare sungko se ne da tata ti chik susu mana jubya nga drangya semba zangbo cheyare ta chik da di he di yore tanda sungza da di tata he jawa tsamare ta sa lo phaji di tongcha ge ngoni ma ta di nguruk songja ji teso chik tu ngemba tende mongpo yungku yoba da nacha teso thamje la tene phayanda wo tende songja ji sa te du nga teso tata yore esila.
So we have, la.
Ta pene sa ngama ta chik ngururumbo che yugdi ni
No.
ta kabla khande chungku yeming ta pene pyo chik sa hyoya la soba tsama song yore ba. On dende ge no nyuran dende chare de dende chini chagre la soba kab de din nacha dende chini yungre la soba dende song ne de di ni churong song nga dende chi drang na phengre la soba dende song jaba yore esila.
So we have, from one of our, teachers of the past, we have some particular teachings that were handed down, over 1,000 years ago, that were connected with many prophecies about particular times in the future when very particular kind of difficulties would happen. Even was prophesied the fall of the Tibetan Empire, with the Chinese invasion and so forth. And so there are very particular like prayers and practices which are specified for particular times.
And this home da tada dela tene nga dela ta chetang om a hong benzang guru pema sidi hong tadi guru Rinpoche kita zunga de tingsang ta pe garchambure sila.
And so this is mantra, the mantra of Guru Rinpoche, and this is a very important one, a very powerful one to be reciting right now. Om A Hong Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hong. So repeat after me if you want to.
Om A Hong.
Om A Hong.
Benza Guru.
Benza Guru.
Pema Siddhi Hong.
Pema Siddhi Hong.
Om A Hong.
Om A Hong.
Benza Guru.
Benza Guru.
Pema Siddhi Hong.
Pema Siddhi Hong.
Om A Hong.
Om A Hong.
Benza Guru.
Benza Guru.
Pema Siddhi Hong.
Pema Siddhi Hong.
Om A Hong.
Om A Hong.
Benza Guru.
Benza Guru.
Pema Siddhi Hong.
Pema Siddhi Hong.
Oh, that the passage. That too. Dukja tende chungdu kap tabala ta teaching pentu chengeta not tende yore sila.
And so this is one of these mantras which is particularly useful or powerful during these kind of difficult or problematic times. Then chik de an chik semke gikor the depth the logius and then answer de dawachi namjun de semke ki domba dawachi langrebe karache gores namjun de chik semke ki domba den de laya yores dawachi hako song de karache gore
la so
chik mixe ki da triwa dawachi that semke tang dawachi karache gores de domba lengore bes karache gores dawachi segido
oh la so tene semke dan semke ge domba ning de la chepa taxi ji yore sila.
So this is a question coming from Dan McDevitt. It says, I'm reading about creating bodhicitta. Is it done by taking the Bodhisattva vow, or is there more to it? I know that it's a big subject with little time. So there's a little bit of a difference between, generating bodhicitta and taking the vow of bodhicitta.
That semke se undu ane Karina digitula re ta semche se undu ta chik phagi ta semchen da wo chik dongha chele mek che che ni de de di thaya ge che de sem de ja che mo chik chen do wala semche se de so ge de di je thu yo re di semche se nge de.
And so just creating bodhicitta means, just to expand your mind outwards to wish for all beings to be freed from suffering. Ta de yanja chik sunanda. De semche koran le yanchi
Ta pe na ta da nga so ge di na cha ten do me ka nga chwa de thong de le ten che ni o maung ba na nge ge di semche de so ge ta ka se ka nga de te ni chap thu ba ji zogin da se bi ge che ka la de le semche.
And so creating bodhicitta is like, for example, you can observe like the present situation of the suffering of these beings in the world. And then you make a commitment, which says, I'm going to, develop myself so that I am able to completely protect all beings from suffering. And that's bodhicitta.
Ta semche ki domba se di ta te pe tembo cha che ni. Ani chik pe na da nga nda di sa la yong che che ni. Ta nga ge de ni ka se de ta chirong gun du ni ta khilen tamja che gi inda se che ni. Teni khilen du di ka la ani de la da semche ki domba se de cha du yo se.
And then taking that same kind of commitment, but coming before like a teacher like myself, you could come and then there's like an actual more like stabilizing commitment, make a pledge, that you're going to work in that way or work on that path. And then that's what's called taking the Bodhisattva vow.
Ta de yang ta pe na chik ta nang ba chik ngun hie na ta chik domba chom den di ni che di ta pe ne semche de nga pa de yo de nga da che ta nga ge semche domba de le nga ta domba yo nge ma da ji zo no ja go re de ya de nga li ne ka se de chrong la ma ta di ka se ju do de che chi ni zlab do ta chi pa che sen gu to pa se nge do ji po che ni den des chi chrong ga tam ja che o den des che do ta de semche ki domba se ta den des.
And the other way of talking about the Bodhisattva vow is that it's actually like some kind of energy, some kind of, level of realization of the mind, which is transmitted from teacher to student. So it's going all the way from the Buddha and coming down to me. And then when someone would receive it from me, there's a transmission, coming from me to them. And so that's what's meant by the Bodhisattva vow. Ani de oma hong benza guru pema sidi hong de gyanchi nga korangi donda la karere stadi
nanzo anin de la ta da di tsenga se yore tan tsenga se di chetang teni di guru pema te ani ka se di main race guru Rinpoche singe de teni main race la. Teni da dig ngola anika se om a hung se di chukulung ko trukusum hindu kala dig teni di ngo di chetang om de gi tsingila nga de tsingila bi gi de jege tenda sonza om a hung de kosum le jar teni benza se undu ta ka chin jiwa me ba se ko dorje se ki yor ta benza teni ngor se di ta lana me ba pema sedita pema mjungni khore rang main da wache ta namji de ngor pema mjungni sena de yore ta pema de muni khore ge main ga re teni sedi se undi ngudob re hong sedi teni ngudob chor singen da kusum dorji ta lamas che ngudob de ngala chor singen da sekti theka ga dra teni da wache mare.
And so the translation or the meaning of this mantra, so Guru Pema, the two like middle syllables there, are the names of Guru Rinpoche, Guru Padmasambhava, this teacher this is his name mantra. And so Om Ah Hong this is getting into very technical some Buddhist jargon, but it's three aspects of the Buddha, what we call the three kayas of Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. And those are the three syllables which symbolize Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Dharmakaya. Benza is a word, Tibetan, it's a pronunciation of the word Vajra, which means unchangeable. And Siddhi Hong means give me the blessings. So basically it's saying, give me the blessings of the Vajra, that is the unchanging Buddhahood, basically. So you're basically asking for this like supreme spiritual attainment, like bless me to have this sublime or unexcelled, highest level of spiritual attainment.
And then this home blanca main boya tang guru setting at the young can't say new some cigarette. Hence the galactic Garceon Gotanga Sochi Dondo, Hingo, at the Maimba. Benata, Garcere Karina, the parts at the chamber you're thinking. Chanding, Tamchi, Shading, Doding, that you don't Sanji sitting as so this year. Nasu Lord, the Yajin Rotini, Tamchi, Shading and Datilla, Sanji Sierra. Then Chen, she developed something paid to you, Mary, same gen on a magic punaki, Seva Yogich. Reva, that Seva you be paid to Mary, Delatinity Niba. That Karina, Jang, the Doya Dam, Jovia Dam, Sunyala, that Niba that dending. This some young Ejigla, and Naso jumped over Jagioris.
And so when we say then a guru in this mantra, we're talking about someone who has the power or the three qualities of wisdom, love, and power. And so wisdom is this knowingness, the knowing the reality of all things. And so when we talk about what a Buddha is one who, for us, we have our mind. And when we expand our mind outward more and more to the point where we know everything, where we know the nature of everything, that's what we call a Buddha. And so just knowing things isn't all that helpful on its own. We also have to have that love and concern for others, like a mother for her only child. And then just having that love also is not helpful if we don't have any power to do anything for them. So we have to have this third quality of power, which is the power to really, provide refuge, to really protect living beings. And so that's why we say then that this guru is the one who has these three qualities of wisdom, love, and power.